All right, let's discuss the implications of this move now with Patrick Lukusa Kadima, an international relations analyst at Wits University. Thank you very much for joining us in studio, much appreciated. Talk to me about the significance of South Africa's move today.
Good evening and good evening to your viewers. So the significance of this, the move in terms of, recalling back the diplomats from Israel and back to South Africa is a significant move by the government. But I think one of the things we must notice here is that it is not the recalling of the diplomats, which is a permanent move, in terms of taking them out from Israel and not returning them and them losing their status. But it is simply calling them, as the cabinet statement states, simply calling them back, recalling them back for consultations. The key word there is consultations. And these consultations are probably to be held between these diplomats that will probably arrive in the country in the next few days with, government and so on and so forth. So, and might return back after the consultations,
I thought about that. And I also, she said that we want to talk to them. Then why tell the media? And you can have a conversation over the telephone, via Zoom. She's made a public statement. Is it a shot across the bows to Israel to say, if this situation doesn't change, our diplomats are probably out?
Yeah. It's a different thing, talking to your diplomats over the phone. It's another thing, signaling and going publicly out there to say that we have recalled these diplomats for consultation to come and tell us what's the situation there, And I think we need to also accept it's also different sometimes talking to somebody over the phone than talking to them face to face. It's not only South Africa's move. We have seen a lot of countries. Today we saw South Africa and Chad leading the African continent in terms of recalling their diplomats, back to their respective countries to engage them. So I think it is a significant move, but not, something that, people should be able to say that they will not return back. Sure. Like in 2018 when we recalled the ambassador, our South African ambassador, back to South Africa and did not replace him, So those are two different distinctions that people need to make currently.
Yeah, fair point. She also says it's a good thing. It's in our best interests as South Africa. How could that be? Why would she say something like that? In what way?
The country is a sovereign state. It is allowed to hold its own views in terms of what's happening in the global sphere. Yeah. And cabinet, as part of the executive arm of government, has decided that they believe that what has been happening in that region needs a response. Look, it's very clear that the United Nations General Assembly voted for a truce to happen, a humanitarian truce to allow water, healthcare, equipments to go through, and the continuous disregard of international law by certain states, sends a strong message that maybe international law is not as strong as people think it is, and therefore certain states believe that if certain countries do not want to abide by resolutions, then they have to take steps themselves in line with international law, either by recalling the ambassadors, either by expelling the receiving the ambassador from another state that is in the country. So they have all these measures they have to take in place, and it's unfortunate this has happened. We saw even during the UN before the vote, how the United States and certain allies wanted to water down this vote. Canada even seeking an amendment back by the United States of America. But then we see now the United States isolated at the General Assembly, and it's a very big statement, including the EU, a divided European Union, where France has also voted for a truce, a humanitarian truce to happen.
Some people would say we didn't recall our diplomats when Russia invaded Ukraine. Yeah. So why are we doing it now? What would you say to that?
So, like I've said, there are various measures that a sovereign state is allowed to take under international law. Now, and these measures obviously are weighed by different factors. Unfortunately, I did not sit in cabinet to hear the factors that that they weigh, you know, and come up with a decision. But different conflicts have different result in different perceptions, you know, within countries in the you know, global order. But I also think that you know, many people are focusing on what is happening, but are not asking themselves, what about what is China saying about this conflict?
I mean, this is the other thing is, you know, are we looking at geopolitically? Are we looking at polarization? Countries are sort of choosing sides, if you will. Or do you think that ultimately there's a lot of cool heads around the Middle East at the moment and big efforts? I mean, we're seeing even the United States, which is a staunch ally of Israel, is saying, Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, saying, we need a pause in this because what is happening in Gaza is horrific.
No, it's not polarization that I think that's happening currently. I think even through the UN General Assembly vote, we saw where the world stands. You know, yes, there are 14 countries that voted no, others abstained, a few, then the majority voted yes. But I do think that it is the world, most of these countries in the world believe that it's time that, you know, civilians should not be part of this, should not be casualty, you know. You know, there's one thing, there's international humanitarian law that governs several states in this global order, and international humanitarian law is very clear that we should respect civilians in conflicts. Women and children should be able to access water, healthcare, and should not be targeted. But when a conflict like this goes out of control and affects civilians, I think it's only common sense that even if you're a diplomat, even if you're an ambassador, a minister of foreign affairs, you take a side to defend the ordinary civilian, the ordinary child, the ordinary mother that just wants to go and make a living.
And the fact that Israel seems still fairly hardline, even in the face of its ally, the United States, saying, look, it's time to pause this. Does that speak about the weakness of international humanitarian laws?
To a certain extent, it does. It does. Even if I wanted to defend international humanitarian law, it does show the weaknesses of global governance. You know, it does show also, to a certain extent, that you know, the United States has not played its part fully in terms of trying to mediate in this conflict. It's one thing to say, you know, pause this. It's another to speak to your ally and have them sit down and say, look, I think let's put a pause on this and let people have access to healthcare. And cabinet's statement is very clear. It's backed up by its reasons of international humanitarian law, saying that it's really saddened by what is happening there and lack of access to water and healthcare.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. We'll certainly have to see what happens after those conversations when the our diplomats in Israel come back to Pretoria for a chat. We'll see if they go back again and what the next step from our government may be. Let's hope by then there is some sort of ceasefire in place, because truly what's going on in Gaza with 10,000 people dead, mostly civilians, is truly horrific. Thank you so much for joining us in studio. Patrick Lukusa Kadima is an international relations analyst at Wits University.